Hi everyone, first of all, thanks so much to Maxon for this webinar. And I'm going to show you some insights from our workflow and from our use of Cinema 4D, of course, and also hoping to stimulate your thought and critical approach to visuals and to the image construction as well. So this is me, the speaker right now, Cristian, and together with my partner, there is Lorena, we founded Atelier Crilo many years ago, was in 2010. And Atelier Crilo specializes in architectural visualization. We are architects, so it was from there that we started to develop our skills in 3D architectural visualization. And then in animation. So some of our current works to have an idea of the different approaches to the visuals that we have. Today we work with clients from Italy, we are Rome's based, but mainly from abroad. And it is not only something about image creation or beauty of the images, but an issue about communication, I mean, because communication goals that every project needs in a different way. So like this one, for example, a winner entry for Pisa Stadium competition. There is a large-scale building inside Pisa. There is an historic city in Italy, crucial aspect. And in this waterfront, for example, waterfront development, we find a natural mood, but other way, in other images, like these aerial views of the same waterfront of before, we add an illustrative approach, mainly Mare painting stuff, as you can see, because the lack of good photographs or drone support. Oh, and this one is curious because how often happens was more intensive, the work on the vegetation than in representing the building in itself. So here I prepared a zoom for you with a little detail of the pomodori right here, the red tomatoes, I mean. The most difficult was to obtain this kind of subscattering material with luminescent features, you know. It's not so difficult to have the material in itself, it's really easy. But it's to have this general light condition, outdoor, recognizable so far from the camera, that is impossible to obtain in this kind of image without a rim light, a light behind the pomodori. This is what we study, like photographic approach to the visual. Well, for example, this is another reconstruction in 3D of a chapel in Villa Serón in Spain by Lorena's PhD research about lighting techniques and visual arts, the connection with visual arts. The first shot, I repeat again, was a photograph, the real photograph. The second one, the 3D reconstruction. So here is crucial, the knowledge about lighting techniques and also by photography. And everything we consider in our images is to make readable important details that with a wrong illumination, they risked to be lost. This is the goal. This is our approach also for animation project. For example, here, there is an animation project. This year, we were so lucky to be in commission film for this one, in CG Architects Award for this animation. So let's go to speculative projects, and in which Cinema 4D, in its efficiency, makes simple many complicated processes and situations in visualization in activity industry, allow us to fully dedicate to the image construction as well. So this is our pyramid of value, in which you can see, you can recognize at the top, the lighting, the composition, the storytelling, color theory. These are the strengths for a good image foundation in our workflow. So for example, here, this is a cycle of houses in which we experimented to stress the machines and ourselves, of course, in several visualization tasks. And I'm going to show you that this guy here, there is outdated house, there is the case study of today. So the curiosity in those images is that we rendered all the houses with different rendering engines. But the end, as you can see here, are quite similar in mood and feel. So this is Orteiza house, inspired by the namesake. Namesake is stood for homonym Spanish culture. And Jorge Orteiza, that I invite you to check it out on internet. And I highlighted the processes involved here in the visuals, and only with the use of body paint 3D. So inside Cinema 4D. Then I will introduce the sculpting tools later. But right now, body paint, to explain, body paint 3D is like Photoshop, but painting in 3D, of course. Fundamentally, you can manage and paint in every channel of your material. From diffuse channel, for example, here you have rock material creation, for example. In the material creation, if you apply painting with a rock texture over here, you can create rapidly a rock. Or you can paint in the ambient occlusion, we did a lot here. Or you can paint in the channel of your material with rawness or dirt. Or if the material, of course, is supporting this kind of channel. Or you can paint in, this is curious, projection landscape. Because if you project over a plane something, you can do with the 3D painting. And not only over a surface, but also projecting over a landscape object. These are the default object in Cinema 4D. So it's really useful. So let's have a look to this body paint possibilities inside Cinema 4D. So before to open up a file, I want to recall to your mind some theory about UV coordinates. That is the common representation. UV, U and V stand for horizontal and vertical coordinates. So you can have, for organic modeling, landscaping, a very useful way to imagine, to project over a plane on the left here, a painting that you are acting in 3D. And sometimes it's the winning combination of the two projections, back and forth, arriving to Photoshop, then coming back to the 3D. And this is the workflow that I prefer. And right now I want to open up an easy test. I exported a piece of Orteiza house. And as you can see, I want to underline the useful landscape object that you have like default object right here in Cinema 4D. And the landscape is something that when you act with the parameters, it's able to replicate many things that you want, from the formation of a hill, of a mountain. You have a bunch of parameters here, of course, to replicate in the scale, rock formation, hills, mountains, the seed to have custom shapes, and I phrased a shape that I liked that is something like a mountain over here. And right now I want to go to the module of body paint, UV edit. So UV edit, so in this way I have all the representation that is the double representation. So if I open up the material here right now, as you can see, I am able to see the double screen, the bidimensional 3D itself. So if I go to exactly looking at the interface right now, you can go for layers here, exactly like in Photoshop. For brushes, here the curious thing is that you can load custom brush, exactly the same. And so you can have, for example, watercolor brushes that are my favorite from digital painting experience. For example, if I go with this easy brush here, and I go to the right layer, painting with colors, for example, test here, I can go for an easy painting right now in 3D. With this kind of watercolor brushes, and I have size, pressure, sensitivity, rotation, jitter counts, all the things that are in Photoshop. It's extremely useful, for example, here in the simulation for the snow. For example, if I take the right brush with a white, for example, it's extremely powerful to have the snow effect right here. And as you can see, you can have the double representation and playing also in the bidimensional. And sometimes I can go like a surgical instrument to say, oh, well, is that one the area that I want to study here, for example? saving up the texture and opening Photoshop. I have the same area here in which I can say right now with the tool that I prefer, I can go to edit this area in Photoshop and then applying and saving, find the same things right there. So I need to reload the text, so I can go for do it right now and reload it. The X is appeared. So when I have this kind of tool, and another that is extremely useful, for example, is the text tool right here, because it is acting like a sort of forced perspective, ta-da, or anamorphosi in Italian. And if I go, for example, I come back to the painting, another tremendous feature is that I can paint not only with the solid color, but also with texture paint. So in this corner on the left or the bottom, you have solid color, but also paint with texture. So the possibility to load from this kind of texture. I did it before. So right now, painting with texture in the correct layer, I'm going to paint with texture. And when you have something like the seed or a repetition, you can switch with scale, rotation, to have different way, pressure, sensitivities, and all the things that you know. So I come back to the other things that I want to show you right now. And so let's continue with the other things with a rapid glance, for example, to look at inspiration that I mentioned before. For example, the use of painting is always a way to understand lighting. And now I'm showing you a rapid and easy breakdown. This guy here, I repeat, about Etna was a digital painting and a site-specific work exhibited in Catania in front of this wonderful volcano. And the brush are exactly the same we loaded in body paint before. And I used for bidimensional, like this here, this drawing here, or for three-dimensional. So this is the reason of this pictorial mood and look of many of our images. For the use of real blushes coming from our digital teaching experience and expertise. So let's continue with a rapid glance to the sculpting tools, saying rapidly some words about that. So here, this they are looking at the screen right now are raw shapes that we used to design the landscape from scratch, because this is a stress test in which we design the house, we design the landscape, and arrive into the visualization. So we use the architect's method. There is something about putting levels one above the others, as you can see here, with these prismatic shapes that needed to be optimized to close the holes at the beginning inside the mesh topologies, and to be further subdivided to start the sculpting in Cinema 4D. So you need to be careful about the complex mesh, because you have something that is in the foreground is to be detailed, and so mainly in the visible part of the camera, but leaving few polygons in the mid-range, in the midground or in the background, where you can avoid to overload the model. And this is a short video that will introduce the sculpting module, and then I will show you the stencil and the stamp. So, as you can see here, it's really easy to understand the tools that is available in the module. So you have knife to carve something like a rock formation, amplify, pinch, exactly what they are supposed to be. But something that's more powerful in my workflow is to use the stamp and the stances. So the difference is that you are using a texture to overlaying this kind of noise or pattern over your mesh. So now I want to go to open up this file here. So I'm going to use Sculpt right now, and then I prepared a file for you. So the first thing to say is about level of details, because you have two different options to start with the sculpting. A level of detail is something you need when you design exactly your interaction, like in a level design that we did and in video games. So if you have the sculpt tag here in the object, you have the possibility to increase or to decrease the level of detail. For example, for video game asset, it's crucial to have this kind of approach. But if we go with this guy here, we can go with the easy tool that I showed before. It's actually the same. So smooth is something that is trying to relax your mesh, like in this moment here, or the knife to carving, to cut out, to pinch, to inflate. But I want to underline the use of stamp. The stamp and the stencil are available from much of these tools here. But with the pull tool, if I go to stamp and use stamp, I activate it right now, you are able to understand like the deformation of this brush is acting exactly like in this texture that I inserted in. There is a black and white and alpha channel. The stencil is something more exciting because you have the texture and overlaying, and then you decide what is the pattern to arrive to the deformation that you have chosen. For example, here, if I decide that is this part of the screen that I want to apply, I have to move the model exactly in that part. So right now it's not so visible and so nice looking because of course it's a trial, so I will need over, and this is incredible, the smooth that I'm trying right now, and I will need something more detailed like this one from level 2, level 1, level 2, level 3 or 4 or even 5. So this is only a trial. So I can come back to the other things that I want to show you. And MoGraph, this is the last part and the last things that I want to show you of our workflow in this Atlelier house to populate these scenes. These are K-visual with contribute of sculpting that I mentioned and I showed before, of body paint. And MoGraph is a procedural modeling tools for mass distribution of many instances or clone in your scene, and with the randomization option for scale, rotation, and even color. But it's also a tremendous feature to rapidly shape architectural structures like this one. For example, the spiral staircase. This is an exercise that I give to students for the first time that they approach the Cinema 4D with 3 or 4 minutes of time, and it is enough all the time. I know that I am a bad guy doing that. And by the way, in this case study of Atlelier house, MoGraph was largely used to populate the scene and creating clones distribution. And it was extremely powerful to start from one single tree, arriving to a nice looking forest with a huge savings of polygons at time of rendering. You know, this is the first guy and this is the forest with this single species, not 3 or 4 or 5 like usually it happens. And this is just a 20-second of MoGraph video to explain, to have a look to the, to have an idea of MoGraph possibilities in, for example, in this use, in this case of the forest. And all is acting right now in this panel here with the randomized effector. Because you have a clone, then you can choose effectors, and the random effector is one of the most powerful. For example, if I stop the video, you have the possibility starting from the single object that you are acting like a clone, like an instance, the position, you have the scale, and the important thing is the scale in height, and so in this case, or in the rotation, to have this variability in the forest formation. So this is the ending, and in which I want to summarize with this night view that is the most time consuming and all the contributes inside this case study. We've not seen many of the processes, of course, before time, because time, but I hope that the few easy things that I showed can help anyone here in their image development. So this is a reminder, all the techniques that I explained before are available on our Vimeo channel, so you can find our channel easily typing our name, Atlelier Crilo, on the search. if you have a curiosity to look more. And that's all. I'm right now ready to pass the word to another panelist, that would be Dusan. And really thank you for your listening and for your attention. And so that's it. Bye-bye and ciao from Roma.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining the webinar. My name is Dusan Vukcevic. I am a self-taught 3D artist with over 15 years of experience in CG industry. I work as a freelancer from Slovenia, working with companies, studios, and other artists from all over the world. Now I started with 2D animation, then slowly transitioned to 3D animations. Later I became very passionate about visualization, interior design, and architecture in general. I still do a lot of animations, but they are usually product or architectural animations. I occasionally also teach Cinema 4D in workshops, schools, and create tutorials. Now, I want to show you a couple of projects, actually 2 projects. This is the first one. I created this scene using Cinema 4D, and I rendered it using Octane Render. It's an unbiased GPU renderer. Now, Octane is very well integrated into Cinema 4D, but I believe Pro Render, which now comes with Cinema 4D, is a great option because it is integrated even better. And it takes full advantage of all the options available in the viewports, especially the ones included in the latest releases, like reflection and shadow. So I believe Pro Render will be one of the tools I will be definitely using more in the future. Now, this is my personal project. Started off basically as a simple sketch. I put together a couple of cubes and a window. So I was exploring the way to create a nice composition. So I kind of liked this and decided to go on. So I started modeling and I came up with this clay render. So I continued with the lighting and I lit the scene with an HDR that has a strong sunlight in it. So it creates a nice shadows and nice highlights. Now here's the interesting part. This is something I don't usually do, but I always like to explore. And Cinema 4D is always great for exploring different stuff. So if we look at the scene from the side, you will notice there is no wall on the right side. And it's a huge opening. Now, why would I do that? This method reduces the number of light bounces necessary to fully illuminate the scene, so it renders much, much faster. Now, this can be, the images tend to get flat if you use this technique, so you need to use the correct appropriate HDR, or if I show you right in the Cinema 4D, or use additional lighting. Now, those additional lights will give you more depth. They will give you more highlights, and they will give you more shadow. Now, if you look at the scene, you will say this is cheating. This is not how it's supposed to be done. But in reality, interior photographers, they use the same technique. Basically, photographers use softboxes and similar light sources to illuminate and highlight objects in the room. So basically, you can do the same in 3D. I mean, we're trying to replicate real life. So we're trying to replicate photographs from professional photographers, and they are cheating. They're not just taking pictures of interior, they are lighting them. So I think it's important to not just light the scene with an HDR and leave it the way it looks, but you have to really try different approaches, even though if they seem they're not right. Of course, this is not how I always work. I only do this occasionally. It's if we look at the scene again, so I move the lights around and light certain areas which I like, and then I composite them in Photoshop. So then I move the light around again. So I go on until I mask those areas out and go on until I like all the areas, because it's very difficult to get a good lighting everywhere, at the same time. So some parts are going to look great, some parts will be boring or overblown or too dark. So this is a nice technique to take care of this. But of course, this is very time consuming, so it's not like for daily use, only for maybe personal projects. And also, if you're making an animation or rendering a 360 image, you need a full scene for that. So next, I worked on some shaders, and when I'm using Octane render, I always use Octane node editor. You can very quickly create complex shaders, and you have a nice overview over all the materials. Now, what I always loved about Cinema 4D was the way how quickly you can work, and you have all the tools right at your disposal. So, for instance, I want to make a change to this pillow. Cristian actually showed a few examples already. I'm going to quickly switch to my sculpting, and basically all I have to do, sculpting layout, subdivide it, and I can already try to change the shape maybe, and add a couple of slices, creases here, just to add a bit more detail. So I go back to my viewport, my layout, and I can render. And if I change my mind, I have a tag here and just delete it, so I'm back to the original setup. So this fast workflow is very important, especially if you're a freelancer like myself working alone. Deadlines are always tight, so you really have to be efficient. And C4D really lets me work fast. I mean, the interface, the customizability, I have a bunch of setups for different tests, and I'm able to work very quickly, and that's super important for me. And also finishing up a project, doing a last minute changes, stress time in a project. Last thing you want is for your software to crash. Well, luckily, C4D doesn't crash. I mean, in my case, almost never. It's rock solid stable, so you can really focus on the project, knowing that you got your software behind you, so you can really focus on creative parts. And that is, for me, that's super important. Now, I'm going to show you this live viewer here from Octane. It's rendering very fast. It updates almost in real time, so which makes the workflow even faster. You can tweak the shaders and get instant feedback, move the object, change lighting. It's gives you a lot of flexibility. For instance, if you want to create an animation, it only takes a couple of minutes, especially if you have a couple of graphics cards. I have 4 here, and it works very well, so I can easily create an animation from this. For me, it's working this way is like I find it easier to find nice compositions, nice areas where they're with nice lighting. So basically, like walking inside a room with your camera and looking for a good angle to take a shot, take a picture. So it's a very interesting way to work. And also, when I work with clients, I almost never send them the hardware render. I send them like a render. It can be noisy, but still they can see the lighting, they can see the shaders, they can see everything. So basically, this is a good way to avoid many revisions. And of course, no need for render farms if you have a couple of graphics cards. Like I mentioned, this was my personal project, so no client involved. I really like working on my projects, as I made quite a few already. Thanks to personal project, I believe I grew as an artist. With every project, I try to do something else, use a different tool, different technique. Even though I'm very busy with client jobs, I still try to, I really want to basically do a lot of personal projects, and you really learn a lot with those. So I encourage everybody to do your personal projects. Now, next thing I'm going to show you is not a personal project. It's a project for an architect, archivist, architect. They needed some visualizations, and the project did not have tight deadlines. Also, they didn't need animations, so I decided to use Corona. It's a renderer I like to use a lot. It's a great renderer. The client only basically wanted a couple of renders, but I decided to do something more for the client. It's something I always do. Always try to give more than they ask. It's a good practice, I believe. So I lit the scene with some sunlight, creating different lighting environments. I created also a dark evening night scene. And for me, when I look at renderings and photographs, I like if there's a certain mood, a feel, or an atmosphere, something that helps with the storytelling. So this is something I'm after when I work on a project, interior or exterior. It's not easy to achieve, but it's always something I look for when I'm creating images. So what I got from the client was a CAD model, and almost always I remodel most of the stuff because I like to add little details to the object, to the CAD model, like little bevels or some deformations to make it look better. And for instance, these panels here on here, I used MoGraph Cloner. So many reasons why I use MoGraph Cloner. You can easily clone them. You can use effectors to add randomization, so it's not perfectly aligned, which adds a lot to the realism. And you can reduce the memory the cinema uses if you take on render instances. Excuse me. So I also use MoGraph for these wooden parts here, those planks here, and I really find MoGraph indispensable. No matter what kind of project I'm working on, MoGraph is always going to be there. So it's a fantastic tool. So I was free to do whatever I really want. So I decided to surround the house with a lot of vegetation. And that, of course, meant I have to use a lot of instancing. And I used a simple Cinema 4D instance object, and I placed all the trees by hand because of the composition purposes. I placed many cameras, so all the trees are basically taking part in the composition. It's always important to not forget the render instance, so you save the memory. Otherwise, it's pointless to make instances. The trees, some of them are from online library, and some of them I created using Forester plugin. Now, this plugin is a great plugin for creating vegetation, and you have, as you see in a tree library, you have a lot of options you can go with. You can use one of those and modify them, or you can start from scratch, create a tree, you can create a flower, you can create a rock, and grass, of course. So it's really, and you can animate all the parameters, you can add wind, so it's very flexible and very great plugin. So next, the grass. Of course, the grass, millions and millions of instances, you have to use some kind of a scatterer. And usually I like to use MoGraph Cloner again. Then I use a surface spread. Then I use Forester scatter. When I'm using Octane, I use Octane scatter. Now, when you're working like you have full geometry in the scene, this tends to slow down the viewport. So it's always a good idea when you're not working directly with the grass, for instance, is to change the appearance of it with and change it. I changed in this case and change it in cubes. It's a simple function with surface spread, so you can easily move around the scene. Or I just simply remove the grass when I'm not focusing on it, when I'm working on other objects. The same goes for the heavy objects. It's pointless to have everything open in the scene to be slowing down your viewport. So Optimization is always a good idea. Use of layers. I always use the layers, so you have everything in very good control, so you can quickly disable and enable different elements of your scene. Now for the lighting, I used a simple HDR, and that lit, the HDR lit the whole scene. I added some additional lights in interior, and the purpose for that was I made them very warm colored, so you give this kind of a welcoming, warm feeling. So outside it's cloudy and looks cold, and inside you turn on the warm lights and everything looks cozy and welcoming. So it's something like, again, creating emotions, creating environment, atmosphere. Now the models in the interior, I modeled some of them, and some of them I used from my library. I bought them online. I have this, for me it's like this: if I find a good model online, it's pointless for me to model it. I mean, if it's a great model, I will buy it and I will use it. Unless I'm practicing modeling or the clients ask for something specific, then I model all the models. And actually, I really enjoy that process as well in Cinema 4D. Modeling is really great. For the texturing, I used a lot of textures, many different ones actually. And I also like to create my textures in Substance Designer. And it's very easy to import substances inside Cinema 4D. You just load them in and that's it. And once you have the substance inside of Cinema 4D, like, you really have so much control. You can see all these parameters. You can really change everything on the fly. Everything you prepared in Substance you can use here and really work very fast and very efficiently. So it's a very nice way to work with textures, and I really like this workflow very much. Now this was a smaller project. I also work on a bigger project as well, and when I do, I outsource work to other artists or studios, and I really enjoy collaborating as well. You know, I like meeting artists and going to conferences, speaking at conferences like D2, like Digital Drawing Days. It's important to leave your office or your studio from time to time and meet fellow artists. It's really something I started doing recently, and I really enjoy it. Again, I want to say another thing about personal projects, which are something I really love doing, and I believe I made it this far thanks to my personal project. So I encourage everybody to really work on your own personal projects, and you'll be surprised how much you will learn in the process of making them. Okay, so that's all from me. Thank you for joining in today, and thank you for watching.
Hello. Well, my name is Eric de Broche, and I'm the principal of the rendering firm Luxigon. I'm sorry if my English is not perfect today. It's because I have a hay fever that is absolutely dramatic. So I sneeze, I cry, my eyes are all red and everything. But I will try to do my best to explain a few things about the workflow that we are using at Luxigon. So, who are we? So I will do a quick introduction of Luxigon and then show you one specific project that we did in New York, and I'm trying to explain the way we are using Cinema 4D. Although I have to say I'm learning a lot through this webinar so far, because there are a lot of functions that we are not using and we should. And I feel miserable that I'm using Cinema 4D for so long at such a basic level. So we are proudly serving birds and lens flare since 1917. Luxigon was founded by Bob Luxigon in Paris just after the Second World War, or during the First World War. I mean, during the First World War. That's not the office that we are having with parts of the team that you can see at the windows waving happily. We are using computers, surprisingly, and too bad we are seeing a 3ds Max screen in the foreground, but it's actually because we are using both. We are using both Max and Cinema 4D. Me personally, I'm using Cinema 4D, and I intend to never touch Max in my life, which I did so far. We are also not working. That's the office in Los Angeles. It's a very cool office, and the weather is fantastic. And they are working extremely hard, and they are all Cinema 4D users. So it gives you a little of the mood of the office. And that's the office in Vienna, where people are actually also working with computers, which is kind of interesting because we need them. So, or are we doing what we are doing? So we have, the most important to me is that everything is clear from the very beginning. So we wrote a very refined modus operandi, which is saying the way we would like to work. So there are all sorts of details, all the questions, we are explaining everything. Unfortunately, nobody is reading it. Really, I mean, nobody is reading it. Never. It's too bad because that's what permits to do a good job, is actually to work in a good frame. And although it's happening from time to time, it's not very often. But God, we are trying. And to me, this is like the most important thing, way before what software we are using and what technique we are using, is actually to make everything clear from the start, so you are not getting worried when you start working. So now I will show you a project that we did for the firm Rex that is in New York. It's a long time we are working with Rex, so we kind of understand each other very well, which is saving a lot of time and lots of back and forth. And I mean, we trust each other, so it's kind of easy. But it was somehow a very important project. So this is Joshua Prince Ramus, the leader of Rex, the principal of Rex. He was working at OMA before, and well, so he did, for example, the Central Library in Seattle, or the D.A. and Charles Wally Theater in Dallas, this beautiful Vaco Fashion Center in Turkey, and it was chosen. So we did many phases, but it was chosen to design a theater that is just at the base of the World Trade Center one, the new one, so near the monuments that are the monument for the victim of the September 11. So it's kind of a very emblematic situation, location. Sorry. Again, this is the hay fever. Normally, I'm much faster and much more. Well, I sound more intelligent. Not I am more intelligent. I sound more intelligent. So one of the things that is really important to us is to have a really nice brief to understand actually how the project is working. We need all the details, so we don't have to ask stupid questions, and from then we can move on feeling confident. And I have to say that, although I don't like to advertise much, but I have to say that when the project is arriving in Cinema 4D, this is the moment where I feel better. And I know that when it's in Cinema 4D, I will have an image in the end. And I promise you that it's something that is kind of important to trust the software, the same way people are trusting you. If you can trust the software, and to me, this is the main feature of Cinema 4D, and I've tried all the possible softwares, is actually to trust the software that you are working on. So here we go for the situation. Here, as you can see, the one World Trade Center. There is the two World Trade Center that will be built by Big, and there is the station that is done by Calatrava. So a few images from the site. So it's not an easy site because, as you will see, the theater itself is kind of a small building. So, and it's embedded into a lot of high rises. So it's not easy. There are very specific textures on the ground. Actually, we use substance to make them because it's nice to introduce some sort of variation. So you can see the location still. And another one with people with no legs. And the expensive Calatrava station, because actually the budget from the pack, so from the theater, went down because the Calatrava building kind of took all the money away. So we did the previous phases. So the images I will show you is at the last phase, where actually it was to convince the boards and the mayor of New York. So we did a lot. They are all done in Cinema 4D, sometimes with the Cinema 4D renderer, sometimes with V-Ray, and now with Octane. But I have to say that I like the Cinema renderer, not because it's a great renderer, and I'm sorry, Maxon, about that, but actually because it's not that great, and I like to work in Photoshop, so I don't have an image that is too prominent. Also, we don't look for realism at all. We like the idea of collage. So I would say that in terms of technique, even though we can use Cinema 4D in a very complicated way and look like absolute geeks, most of the time we are using it at a very basic level. So we still have this freedom to have images that are a bit different than what software can just output. So to us, it's very important to keep this artistic feeling that is not too dependent from the software itself. I mean, the reliability of Cinema 4D is absolutely what we need. All the fancy stuff we are not using much. It's happening from time to time because you need it on a project, but otherwise. I like the render is putting illustrations, not realistic 3D, which I think is something that's really interesting because it has this calm and not too realistic situation, especially as we do competitions. So we don't need to go too far into the realism because it will be, I guess, counterproductive sometimes. So there are a few images from the previous stages, from inside, outside, a little party, kids extremely happy to be near the stairs, a spectacular theater play. I also enjoy very much Skate and Tunes. It's too bad I cannot use it more, but it's really something that I love with Cinema 4D because, well, actually, we are sharing with Rex a common sympathy for Miss Van der Rohe. So I did drawings just for fun, using a technique that is more close to the one Miss could have used and realistic 3D renders. You can see that. So let's move to phase 3, and this is where phase 3 I will show you the image, one of the image that we did, and try to explain you a bit more about the workflow that we're having. So the main issue with the building, and this is to me what is the most important when we start a project, is to understand the situation very well. So it means that we know that it's going to be a small project. Well, actually it's a big project, but unfortunately it's in New York, so everything looks a bit small in New York because the scale of the city is considerable. And it can actually, it is to me what was the most difficult problem to solve. It's exactly like this illustration is showing. I mean, you have a little dude surrounded by gigantic dudes, and obviously the gigantic dudes are making fun of the little dudes, which is not so nice. So there are some images that we did. So again, we keep everything super simple. It's really closer to illustration, actually, to realistic 3D renders, because it's just a drawing, and I like to consider that things just have to stay a drawing and not say too much, or not say things that actually could be complicated to manage later on. So there is a level of imprecision, I would say, that I think is extremely important. So this one is integrally done in 3D. it's really the placement of light and of lights and the over darkening of the surrounding. That is actually possible if you think in terms of photography, because if you want to give something a lot of light, then it can dim everything that is around. Yeah, playing with the Calatrava building that you can see in the back, and it's not easy because actually it's just a cube. So by day it's a cube. By night there is a translucency that is happening, but by day, and thanks God I discovered the translucency in Cinema 4D was working for real after decades of using Cinema 4D. So as you can see a closer view. Okay, another one, and another one. They're all done in Cinema 4D. All of this, you see the translucency is working quite well. So let's do just one image. So unfortunately, I cannot show it to you because I just discovered that my powerful computer, the microphone was broken. So I'm using a MacBook Air, and there is no way I'm going to open Cinema 4D and everything on the MacBook Air. So I did a quick presentation to show you how it goes. So to me, I don't expect a fantastic render from the computer. The real work starts when we have an image, but not necessarily a final image. As you will see in the few next slides, the output is extremely generic and extremely simple. Why so? It's because it gives us latitude. It's giving us freedom, and we are not screwed by the solution that we choose already at rendering time. Also, we know that it's going to change 100 times, so we don't put too much efforts into the 3D, which is probably one workflow. I would say that the opposite works super well. So you put a lot of efforts in the 3D at the very beginning, so you have minor adjustments in the end. Yeah, I'm coming from an era where computer was extremely slow, so I'm used to do things by hand as well. It's giving some sort of specificity, and I like to keep some sort of artistic specificity over a computer technique. So a lot of textures. That's where we start. So we gather as many textures from the site, similar to the sites. We browse Flickr, we use Substance, we make them by hand. So for example, the facade of the building is extremely complicated, so this we had to do by hand. It took like a lot of time. That's the texture from the building. So again, it was done in Photoshop and then with Substance to create this very complicated grids, because the pattern was an extremely difficult pattern to get, and every single piece of the facade is different, even though they are symmetrical. A large part of it is entirely different. So we created, and it was not easy because some surfaces were also not planar, but were twisted, so we had to create the texture in a way that it was fitting the. I know that we should use body paint, and I've been completely convinced by Crilo about we should use body paint now. Thank you for that, because I promise that I will work on it more. We also do a mood board, because it's very important to know where you are going. So this is coming from a discussion, what you want, or sometimes not even a discussion. Actually, you propose, you say, okay, this is how I see the image because of this and that, and as you can see, to me, New York was kind of dark, very little glittering lights. It's nice when it's gloomy. It's a bit what you expect from an evening at the theater. And there is also all the phenomenology of New York, all the imagination that you. So we quickly do a mood board, and I think it's nice because from the mood board there are a lot of textures that you can get. There's lots of way of putting the light that you can understand. So it's browsing Flickr or Pixels or. you kind of have an idea of what you want even before starting working on the images. We do, of course, a lot of previews. So we do previews at the lowest possible settings, but trying to show a little of what it could be, mainly to decide about the point of view. So voila, with a few people always, because it's nice to give an ambience at the very beginning. Although obviously not everything is ready, but the substance material is already started, and you can see the tree. I'm not a huge fan of 3D trees. First, because even though some people are creating their 3D trees, most of them are coming from very famous companies that are selling them, and it tends to make all the images look the same. So pictures of trees are actually what I find the most, the fastest, because there is the deadline to take into account. It's constant race against the clock. And well, we will see that later, but it means that it's already a previous stage. There is already some sort of ambience, and there is already what you need to understand from an image, from the image. So another one. So for the people that are doing previews, just removing the anti-aliasing to no anti-aliasing in Cinema 4D is kind of speeding the process by 10. Same by removing the blurry reflection, you remove it and you can have kind of preview instantly. It's something that I discovered over the years, that the anti-aliasing in Cinema 4D is kind of what is costing the most, assuming you are not using the physical renderer, which is not the case here. We didn't use the physical renderer. Okay, so this is the preview that kind of started really the moods. So the cube is actually emitting light around. It's made with a translucency material. Well, you don't see it well here, but you will see it better in the other views. There is the rain, and everything's kind of dark, and it kind of creates some sort of moods. I don't like to say Blade Runner, but there I said it. So here you can see that we are working with polygons and 3D models for real. So it's not everything is in Photoshop actually. Funny enough, the process is more into removing details than to add details. I think that an image has to be some sort of having some sort of planar elegance, and you can be easily distracted by adding too many details. So having a model that is actually too precise. It's nice when things are slightly disappearing. So people are on billboards as well, as you can see. There are real cars, 3D cars. There is the Ghostbusters car somewhere on the right. The people placement. So a lot of the people are already placed in 3D and will stay for the final render, but we avoid, of course, placing people in the foreground, because every time we did it, the people have to be removed at some point. So voila. The idea as well is that very generally we do 3 renders. There's one with everything, one with without the trees, and one without the people, so we can composite at the last minute whatever is important. So it means that for each image there is a minimum of 3 renders. Here you can see the white model, the clay model. So obviously the trees are on billboard now. It's obvious, and the people as well. So it's nice when you are at night, billboard people. Of course, when you are by day, depending on the sun situation, they could not cast shadow. But well, let's work. So this is the beauty path. So as you can see, it's pretty dull. There is a bit nothing. And I'm always, I would say that I'm always horrified by the beauty pass, but I know what I'm doing. So in the end, but at first it's like you have to climb a mountain. What is nice is that we are using buffers, and I think that in Cinema 4D, so slowly but surely, other softwares are coming to it. I don't like the color selection and everything, because if you have very tiny elements or very thin elements, they are incredibly difficult to lasso. And I love Cinema 4D just because of it was actually a game changer for me, the buffers, because you can see still the selection through glass. See, buffers, wonderful. So it means that if I just want to work on the facade, I have a buffer, so an alpha layer, an alpha channel, that you can set up super easily in Cinema 4D with just a tag. And we abundantly use them because we are mostly working in Photoshop. So we generally the best to start with a quick color balance. So it's not over enthusiastic in terms of color, and then you start adding details. So this is, as you can see, most of the details are coming from the mood boards. I'm trying to stay as close as possible from the mood board. Voila, a bit of rain because it costs nothing. I've tried to do rain with particles, but yeah, it's better if you have a good picture. It kind of works nicely. Because it was raining, and obviously this is something I forgot. I had to put umbrellas on every people. Next time I will pay more attention to what I'm doing. Then you darken, and there you can see the translucency. So it's as well something that I love with Cinema 4D, is that the passes, so the different reflection, ambient occlusion, are extremely effective. All the softwares have passes, and I find the incredibly simple way of having them in Cinema 4D. Like if you're lacking light, you duplicate a GI layer. If it's not reflective enough, you duplicate the reflective layer, which I'm doing always, which means that I don't really care about what I'm doing in 3D so much. I know that if there is a bit of reflection, I will have just to duplicate 2 or 3 times the layer. And using the buffer, I can have a super wet floor while the rest will be okay. So it means that there is an incredibly easy workflow around the buffers and the layers and the multipass. So now some lens flares, because that's why we are paid to do lens flares. Actually, I have a lens flare plugin that I enjoy very much. So they are created lens flares. Again, you can see that now it's starting to take some relief. Still, the background is extremely dark, and this is so. At the first final image, we had a discussion with the client because he was saying that everything was super dark in the background, and that's and I told him, like, it's a bit like when you are meeting. When you're in love with someone, finally you only see her or him, and that's exactly what I wanted to do with the building. I know that it's not necessarily the situation in New York, but when you're in love, you only see the object of your desire. And for some reason, it works. Sometimes it's good to be French. So here you can see that I duplicated probably 2 or 3 times the translucency layer. Here again, started to lit everything, and it's really based on the idea of cutting and pasting some parts of the passes. It gives you an incredible, and this is finally the final image that made it to the newspapers, the TV, the everything, because it was a huge event. So it's kind of unusual because it's taking a bit of risk, especially in the US, where they are used to have images that are kind of a bit more realistic. But when there is an impression, people will pay attention to a project, and this is something that we are looking for, is that people, either they like it or they don't like it, and even if they feel uncomfortable, at least they have this feeling toward the project, and it's a nice way to drive attention. So I think I just did I just finished my presentation. I don't know if I was too long or too slow, but I think I probably did around 15 minutes. And I will look forward for questions later. And thank you very much.
Hi, everybody. This is Thomas from Slashcube. I'm gonna be talking a bit about some basic workflow techniques we have for pre-production. Before I start, I'm just gonna say a bit of words about who we are. I'm the founder and art director of Slashcube. The studio was founded in 2013, so we are quite early on our work. But I've been working for more or less 10 years in the architectural visualization industry. Started as a freelance. The studio mainly works with architecture studios. We don't do anything rather than visualizations, competitions, real estate, not so much. And our main focus on all the images and all our work is how to project a product that comes out from communicating some thoughts from our side with the client, and the client to be able to translate the principles of the design that he has when they are projected into an image. Because these two worlds, as we found out through our work, they tend to have either a gap from the one side or the other. So the visualizer cannot really understand or communicate the principles of the project that he's handling, and the same complex thinking that the architect has to do about all the regulations of the design cannot really be through the process of making the design an actual image, because at the end both of them have to create a new product, which is something that you need to actually sell, or you need to convince, or you need to win. We tend to work around a basic concept idea. It includes all kinds of storytelling ideas, emotions, scenarios that can be played through the design itself. We tend to use the design either as a hero, so it is the one thing that you need to matter and watch, or we have to portray it through using it as a background. So the story tends to become what it is after an initial process that is based on communicating our ideas with the project that we have on our hands. It can be a work in progress, it can be something that it will be developed, but in any way, the starting process is the one that will give the ending result. We don't tend to just make it through settings and some fantastic idea at the end that makes the image quite nice and we don't know why, but we like it. But we rather try to bring it from the beginning. That is mainly what I will be trying to put into the presentation. How do we manage to do that? Taking in consideration also one of the most extreme and difficult factors, which is the timeline, the deadline, the time that we have, the obstacles that will end up ruining most of the schedule. So again, this is the thing that will make us feel less stressful at the middle or at the end of the project if it happens, because we will always have from a good amount to a very good amount to an excellent amount, a good knowledge on why we started and where are we going. Especially in the times where we don't have the time, we tend to rely to the program. So to give a really fast let's say, case study. So I'm going to show up our techniques and our kind of workflow through a project that we did with Zaha Hadid, the Holocaust Memorial in London. So I'm going to just show the early stages. The Holocaust is in front of the Westminster, so quite an important and interesting location. And basically what we have at that stage, the first stage, is to create like sketches, ideas, playing around basics inside the software. In these cases where it's the time is limited or we don't have whatever time we need, we tend to stay on as less as software options as possible. So we tend to rely on cinema, and I'm going to show how we do that. So the stage lasts 2 to 4 days. We tend to reference a lot, and the main tool that I'm going to be showing a bit is the picture viewer and some of its controls and how you can use them. I'm going to pass a bit fast this one. So we collect the keywords. It can be any kind of emotion, void, interaction, greenery, meteorite, roughness. These were part of the project itself. Contrast, bloom, empty. We tried to put it also to the designer. Like we asked what he can describe as the project if he had to describe it by words, because they're also on the process, so they don't have finished results. These examples, I just collected them roughly. It's basically it's what we call pre-visualization sketches that are being done from 90% to 100% inside cinema. These are the ideas that we send over, and we get either a confirmation from the client for the camera, the composition, the concept idea, and they're all based in the very general ones. You have to think about the whole process of making the image as you would be painting something. Of course, most people go directly to the detail of the eye and they fit it perfectly, and then they build around it, and eventually they end up the process. But we tend to think about going from as much as we can in a general way, solidifying the key elements, and then we will be adding the layers of information as the process goes on until the final product. So what you see here, it's the early stages. It's the very first idea we have for the project and what it means to show it this way or the other way. So in the case of the Holocaust, we tend to go to Google, as we say. We Google it. We gathered whatever we thought that would showcase the idea that the client had, mood-wise and frame-wise and even weather-wise. And we usually gather like a good amount of maybe 20, 10, 20 previews. So what you see here, it's the pre-visualization. At that point, the main idea of the Holocaust was a sculpture that we didn't have at the moment, so we were using a placeholder. So we tried to build it and work it as kind of a background and a hero. So we have the background and we have the hero shot, because both of them had their importance to the idea of the showcasing the project. And all these were done inside cinema. We used 3D trees. In this occasion, it fitted because we had the difficulty on presenting it as it is, the location. And we like the idea because it gives really fast elements that we like playing with if they actually help the image, the shadows, translucency, depth. And we use all these inside cinema. And how we do that? So basically, it's the picture viewer that I will be showing you and the multipass option that it has. You can filter or mix render elements like reflection channels, whatever channels. it works as a Photoshop, and in this way you kind of build up the image with whatever engine you want. So it can be Cinema's engine, Corona, V-Ray. We use Corona for this one. So let me show you how it looks like. So this is the picture viewer, and I just created like a custom interface. That's also one thing that we really like with Cinema. You can customize all buttons to create a layout that you feel most likely okay with. I mean, at the moment I'm using 3 screens, so I had to find a way to use them all, and I do. So that's a good thing. So what is the multipass? So multipass is actually a system that you see here that it exports, it renders actually your main render. If I go to single pass, I can check each one of them, your main render. In this case, it was this one. And whatever elements here, you can see from the Corona engine, whatever elements you want, like reflection, refraction. So whatever you add when it renders, it stacks up here in a specific order. Like you will put it here, it goes here. And you have to think of this as Photoshop. So whatever is above all the others, it affects them. And each one works exactly as it would be a layer in Photoshop. And it has most, if not all, the layer options as exactly in Photoshop. So you can use it in screen mode, color dodge mode, multiply it, darken, etc. And also you can use a percentage of it. So you can control how much you want it to be affecting your image. So when we have on the pre-visualization stage, the basic idea that we want to follow up, we tend to rely on how we can use the tools that we need so that they can help us showcase what we want. In this case, we wanted something that would create depth, a nice backlit effect, kind of, so that it would showcase the outline of the stone, and the space should feel almost like muted, cold, cool, because it's basement, etc., etc. So how we use it is if we go to multipass, whatever, if I solo this, whatever I try to turn on and choose, it will affect my image as it would be in Photoshop. For example, this is a Z depth that we created. This is the Z depth. You can go back and forth to single pass and multipass. And if I enable it, immediately it just stacks over it. And you can see if I change it to add, it creates a more intense effect. If I go to screen mode, we tend to go to screen mode. It doesn't create like bent area so much. So the idea is to continue and work on the effect that we want. For example, we have here the emission channel, like a bloomy channel, kind of like a lens gloomy camera effect that we can amplify if that's the idea. And then we can go to add, let's say, reflectance if we want to spice up and create a bit more contrast. So what we get as a help from here, it's not the perfect, like fully workable, fully functionable, ideal, let's say, alternative from Photoshop, but you can imagine that on the very early stages, if you had some mistake on your render and you need just some extra light, all this works, I think, on 32 bits. You can put it up to the maximum, so it doesn't really lose the depth of the image that you have. And you can use different kind of elements, translucency for trees if you want to brighten them up, emission, direct. So in this case, we tend to build up the image, and then one of the other options that you can have as a final, you have filter, which is again like a curve filter and a color filter. So you can change the white balance to your likings, whether you wanted to have a slight idea. And again, I mean, this will not reflect so much the final approach. There are elements missing, of course, but it will easily give an idea to us firstly how it can look, and we can then save it and send it to the client, and we won't have really, we won't have spent so much time going back and forth through the other software like Photoshop. I'm going to show you after everything finishes on the, let's say on the early stage, how this can be worked as a reference that we have in mind into Photoshop. But you can see that in some cases it doesn't really, the end result has the basic idea, and that's the important thing here to understand. You need to have something that will portray the project in a way where you want it to be the essential one. Like Eric said, you need to show someone that you are so much in love with something that you almost like want to like let all the others be like secondary or even on the background. So in this way we can easily work around that that idea that we have a story and we need to showcase it as fast as possible. And I mean, if you really browse through the picture viewer, you'll find all kinds of interesting stuff, like for example, you even have like a history button. So here on the history, it can collect as many JPEGs or TIFFs that you have. You can load already finished renders as an image, and you can like go back and forth. So you get the idea. Like we don't see it as a frame buffer only that we can just check the process and save it. It kind of works on a real-time Photoshop basic idea. And I'm going to jump now just to show you the relationship, the relevance between what we do here and how close or not we end up moving into the Photoshop. And it uses the same idea, also showing a bit our, let's say, our process. I'm going to be as fast as I can. So again, this is our layer system in Photoshop. We have a basic kind of structure that we tend to keep. So this is the beauty pass, and you can see the structure. For some reason, let me check. I think I left out the channels. Yeah. So, and here you can see all the channels we created, the zip depths, they're the same. Indirect, masks, these are all from Corona. And it helps, you know, ID masks, you can pick up selections from the 3D elements, or RGB maps, you can collect them by color, etc., etc. So all these are the channels we use. And the structure is very basic, very simple. We first have the corrections on the 3D itself. So you can see here like walls. We add, we blend actually whatever layers and channels we need. We have a kind of a nice workflow so that you don't end up having to change each one of them when the changes come. So they're kind of updating very easily. If someone has a question about it, you can let me know. And then we work on the elements, building up the image according also to what the client asked and how we discussed it. And we're adding up still stuff, and then it's the basic stuff according to how much work the image needs. So it's the montage. In this case, it was quite minimal, I would say. So if I go again, adding light effects, lenses, glaring, moods, smokes, whatever. So everything goes above the image, so you don't interfere. And as we go on, and then at the very top, we tend to have, let's say, the overall, like things that we want to change overall, contrast-wise, basic selections, and vignettes, and whatever else. So this is the build-up image. And if I try to go back and forth apart from the very bad color selection I did here, apart from that, you can actually, I cannot pick it up easily. Anyways, I will do it here. So, yeah, okay. So apart from the, I just needed some time. Apart from the color selection, the two results, they tend to have the same principle, like if they they didn't go too far away. And that's actually what we're aiming at, like thinking about how to make it through a project using our ideas with the easiest and most simplest tools that we can have, so that we ourselves can also see the basic of each project that will make it unique from all the rest that we will do. It's the most easy thing to say, but it's the most difficult thing to make. Like, keep it simple and simply show what it is to be seen, because in the end, that's the whole idea of the image. You need to be able to see by yourself and not read the dot lines and the descriptions and the comments from anybody else. That was all from me. I want to thank you for being here, and I hope that I gave you some small idea on how we try to do things here in Slashcube. I wish you all have a nice afternoon, and please, any question, I'm here to answer. Thank you.